Have you ever thought about the differences between judgment, which we all do? We're judging all the time, even though the religions tell us that we shouldn't judge. It's like a slap in the face of the ignorant, because it is our judgment of people, things, experiences, circumstances that tells us whether or not we want to engage, participate, and those types of things. There's a significant difference between judgment and discernment. And I'm not sure or confident that most people have thought of this, let alone walk around with a conscious awareness of this in their daily lives. Now, judgment and discernment both kind of revolve around the same processes of making evaluations and decisions or assessments about a particular thing, person, experience, etc., etc. However, there are meaningful distinctions between them, and I don't think most people understand that. And I think that, how do you say this? The differences in how judgment and discernment are used, and the mental or emotional processes that go into them, and even the context of what they are. When you just start thinking about what I said, it's like, oh wow, actually, there's an awful lot involved in judgments and discernment. And we can do both of them poorly. So let's look at this for just a second. Judgment, when you judge something or someone, that can be seen as more of a straightforward, off the cuff, kind of quicker, maybe more subjective type of mechanism to interpret things. While discernment is a bit more refined, more subtle, and it has a lot more depth of understanding of the person, the behavior, the experience, the situation. Judgment and discernment overlap, but I think that discernment has a higher degree of insight and wisdom, while judgment can be more generally thought of as, well, a general snap thing, and it can be influenced by bias or emotion. Think about it. Judgment, you can judge somebody's snap judgments. Sometimes you can read a book by its cover and snap judgments work well. Other times it's like, I should have actually looked beyond the surface. And sometimes you never know whether the surface is a good tell of what's underneath the surface. And sometimes the surface is never a good tell of what's underneath the surface. Therefore, the ability to be able to judge and discern accurately, so efficiently and accurately, is kind of important. So, like, seriously. So judgment is one of those things that's usually the first, I'd say more immediate, the snap judgment type thing that we're always doing, or evaluations that we're making about something or someone, a place, an experience, a situation. And I would say judgments come with a more evaluative kind of, is this immediately right, wrong, good, bad type of connotation to them. Because judgments can be quick, very subjective. You're judging something based off of what, experiences, blah, blah, and a whole bunch of things that are subjective to you. And sometimes judgments can be quite emotionally driven. Judgments might be general observations or surface level types of impressions. And I've been saying for years that you've got to go beneath the surface to generally find the truth of just about anything. Like I said, judgments can be heavily influenced by our own biases and our emotions that could drive us. And oftentimes when judgments are influenced by our biases and emotions, that shit can be to our detriment. Not always, but it can be. Thusly, we refer to that type of thing as poor judgment. Yeah, seriously. But discernment, I would say it's a more refined and deeper version of judgment. Discernment would be a judgment with certain things bolted onto it that you've got, that gives you the ability to process at higher levels, if you will, and you're evaluating your judgments, if you will, with more awareness and a deeper understanding of things, because you, for instance, possess more knowledge. Knowledge grants you the eyes to see. The eyes to see really aid you in your ability to accurately judge or discern, because discernment is going to be born from generally a deeper understanding of a particular thing. However, an ability to perceive the subtle things in a way that not everybody can, and recognizing like the nuances of a particular thing or a particular behavior and then being able to see the underlying truths that shit reveals. So discernment is more like a polished or refined version of judgment, if that makes sense, where you've actually taken the time to look deeper and to reflect and understand with greater clarity, or gain a greater clarity through looking deeper and reflecting. You have to possess a greater level of insight, wisdom, knowledge, whatever, to accurately discern. And not all of us are going to do that all the time anyway, because there's so much willful efforts to deceive us. But discernment definitely requires a greater level of insight. You could actually say that discernment requires careful thought, contemplation, and the ability to recognize subtleties that may not be immediately obvious to the lesser aware, the ignorant, the unbegun. Discernment could be said to be a skill or ability to perceive things at a higher level with more clarity and greater accuracy. And it is generally guided by wisdom and experience rather than reaction, emotions, biases, and it tends to be more objective and more refined. Not always, but when you look at what judgment is and consider snap judgments, the fact that we're judging everything as we move through life, as we move through and interact with people. You walk into a convenience store and you may judge whether or not you want to stand next to or behind or in front, a particular person in line because their energy bothers you. They look funny, whatever. We're judging the hell out of things. And we're not always doing it with an eye towards, let me rephrase that. It's something that we do kind of snap judgments. And it's necessary. It's like a really rough, unrefined version of discernment. In some ways, it's not a hard, fast rule. And what brought this to mind is just realizing what's gone on over the last 5 years and at various points along the way, especially during the lockdowns and the corona bullshit. I was saying a lot. People lack the ability to perceive objective reality for what it actually is. And it's probably because they lack the ability to discern. And discernment often requires knowledge and experience so that you can understand deeper nuances, so that you can recognize subtleties, so that you can see or understand what's hidden beneath the surface of what you might be seeing. Whereas judgment may not do that. It could, but it'll do it in a kind of a rough, quick, happenstance kind of way. It may be motivated or fueled by emotion or bias or some other thing, making it a less refined thing and more subjected to the possibility of being wrong, hence poor judgment. A perfect example of this would be once you understand the cluster B spectrum and you've gone through what I've gone through with narcissists, once that awareness hits you because you've reached a critical mass of knowledge and understanding through, for instance, education, now as I move through life, and they're everywhere, so you're going to encounter them, it seems to me that that's just the way it works here, my ability to identify and discern narcissists, narcissistic behavior, the subtleties, the nuances of their behavior, how the surface level behavior may not be conducive to the intentions behind it, being aware that people, that operate like that, it requires an ability to discern at levels that most of us don't do all the time. Whereas judgment, I think it's going to be an awful lot less likely. It'll be more challenging to identify the narcissist because when you're at the level of judgment, I would loosely argue that you may lack the knowledge and awarenesses and experience. Thusly, you're judging rather than discerning. I think that's fair. I think it applies to all of us in all these various aspects. I'm just using this narcissistic thing as an example that many of you may recognize and understand. Judging doesn't necessarily give you the ability to recognize those subtle red flags that are red flags. They're there. There's the little man doing the semaphore with the red flags. But when you're at a level, if you will, and it's not a criticism, it's just where we're all at where we're at, when we're at a level where we're more capable of judging than discerning, the red flags that may require a discernment ability, capacity, don't get seen. They're overlooked. They're not identified for what they are. So anyway, and I'll leave you with this. A lot, and I mean this, a lot of the reasons why I put out on the internet the things that I put out, not every single word, not every single video, but a lot of the subject matters that I talk about, is me at somebody that when I started this was in my late 40s. Now I'm in my early to mid 50s. Fuck, I'll be 53 in 10 days or thereabouts. Things that I wished I would have known when I was in my 20s or 30s. Things I wished I would have been aware of would have been pointed out to me when I was in my 20s and 30s. Because it would have made my life an awful lot, I'll say, easier, in that I would have been able to have awarenesses that allowed me to either recognize certain things and navigate around. Excuse me. So part of my motivation for doing a lot of the monologues that I do and talking about the stuff that I do is it's a lot of shit that nobody ever taught me. And I suffered hard because I didn't know or recognize certain things in life because nobody ever fucking taught me. And I know there's a lot of people out there, men and women, that grew up in single parent homes, or their parents didn't teach them, or insert scenario, where a lot of the things that I talk about aren't in the realm of common knowledge. Until it hit me, I never would have realized how important it is to discern in this reality in a myriad of ways that are far beyond the religious connotations that were given for this stuff, where in those connotations, discernment is something that someone's doing where they're asking God to help them discern. And when you start thinking of it from that context, it's like, oh shit, we got a whole different level of what I affectionately refer to as dumb animal. We're all dumb animals. I think we're born into this condition or traumatized into it. And one of the biggest journeys of any of us is going to be to break through the boundary and the barrier of our own existences out of dumb animal into higher level, higher order human being. And clearly there's a lot of resistance coming at mankind towards those that are working towards those efforts. It may just be a few of us, but it's there. See, I want to live in a world with people who are more knowledgeable, more educated, more aware, more capable of discernment, of evil, etc., etc. And I've said this so many times. It's not about me, it's about getting the right information into people's heads.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is.